You've heard the names before. Michael, the warrior angel, leading heaven's armies. Gabriel, the messenger who brought news that changed the world. And Raphael, the healer, guiding souls and protecting the innocent. These names have echoed through history, familiar in almost every culture, whispered in prayers, painted in stained glass windows. But what if I told you that there are more, much more? Angels with powers that made Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael look like mere servants in comparison. They were once called archangels, but their names, they were erased from the Bible, scrubbed from sacred texts, hidden from history. And we are left to wonder, why? What was so dangerous about their presence? Why were these powerful beings silenced, wiped away from the pages of the world's most sacred book? Imagine for a moment a world where heaven is not as perfect as we've been told. A place where angels aren't just messengers, where they are judges, warriors, guardians of divine order. And some of them stood up to heaven itself. These were not just angels with halos and wings. No, these were beings of immense power, archangels who could bend the fabric of reality. But somehow their stories were erased, their names erased from history. These angels, they didn't just serve him, they challenged him, and for that, they were erased. The archangels we know today, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, these names make up the story we've been told. They fit the picture. They belong to the neat, orderly view of heaven and divine law. But what about the others? The ones who were there at the beginning, who stood just as high as Michael and Gabriel, but whose names never made it into the scriptures. What happened to them? What role did they play in the grand divine drama that's been hidden from us? The truth? It's far darker than you might think. What if the reason these archangels were erased wasn't because of anything they did wrong, but because they knew too much? What if their knowledge, their powers, were too much for the world to handle? What if their truth threatened to unravel the very fabric of divine law? Imagine an angel who could reveal secrets that were never meant to be shared. An archangel who could challenge God's orders. One who questioned the very balance between justice and mercy, obedience and rebellion. What do we do with angels like that? What do you do when heaven itself isn't as perfect as you've been told? These aren't just stories or fables. These archangels were real. Their stories recorded in ancient texts, passed down through generations. But when the church began to formalize its teachings, these archangels didn't fit the picture. They didn't belong in a world where heaven was always perfect, always without flaw. These archangels, they represented truths that were too dangerous for humanity. They spoke of knowledge that was far too great for us to understand. They were the guardians of wisdom, of justice, of secrets that the world wasn't ready to hear. And so their names were wiped away, erased from the Bible, silent. But the story doesn't end there. Even though the church tried to bury these names, somehow their light still shines through. Their stories, like hidden gems, buried deep in other texts, in ancient manuscripts, still remain. They didn't fade into darkness. Their presence still lingers, waiting for someone to ask the right questions, to uncover what was hidden, to speak their names once more. As we dive deeper into the lost archangels, we'll uncover the mysteries that have been silenced for centuries. We'll reveal their names, their roles, and the truth about why they were erased from the Bible, the truth about why their stories were too dangerous to be told. So let's begin with the first of the lost archangels, the one whose light burned so brightly it couldn't be extinguished. Before we uncover the names of the lost archangels, we need to understand what it means to be an archangel. What sets them apart from the angels we know? Why are they called the highest of the high? And most importantly, why are only a few of them ever mentioned in our sacred texts? Let's begin with the basics. In the Bible, we often hear about angels. They are messengers, protectors, and sometimes warriors. But they are not the highest beings in the celestial order. In many ways, angels are the helpers, the foot soldiers, the ones sent to deliver God's will to the human world. But archangels, they are a different kind of being altogether. The word archangel comes from two Greek words, archon, meaning ruler or leader, and angelos, meaning messenger. In short, an archangel is a ruler messenger, a being of great power and authority, standing at the very highest levels of the heavenly hierarchy. In the heavenly realm, Archangels were considered warriors, judges, and guardians of divine law. They were not sent just to deliver messages. They were the commanders. They took on the most important and dangerous tasks in the universe. They were entrusted with the most sacred and often the most difficult roles in maintaining cosmic balance. So what exactly did the archangels do? First, archangels were warriors, not just in the sense of battling evil, but in protecting the divine order itself. They were the defenders of heaven, the guardians of God's throne. When evil forces threatened heaven, when rebellious angels like Lucifer tried to disrupt divine law, it was the archangels who fought to preserve the sacred balance. Take Michael, for example. He is the warrior archangel. The Bible tells us that Michael led God's armies in the battle against Lucifer and his followers during the rebellion. But Michael didn't just battle. He enforced justice. He kept the peace in heaven, making sure that no one crossed boundaries. No one broke divine laws. But archangels weren't just warriors. They were also judges. Think about this. In the book of Enoch, Raphael is described as the angel of justice. He was the one who ensured fairness among the other angels. When disputes arose, whether among angels or even between humans and angels, Raphael's job was to restore balance and order. Imagine a cosmic court where every decision is made with absolute fairness and divine law. That was the role of the archangels. They didn't just fight, they enforced divine will in a way that no one else could. But there's more. Archangels were also guardians, guardians of divine secrets. They carried the most sacred knowledge of God's plan for the universe. They were the ones who knew the secrets of creation, the mysteries of time, and the truths of existence. This knowledge wasn't given lightly. Uriel, one of the lost archangels, is often depicted as the angel of wisdom. He was entrusted with understanding the hidden aspects of creation. He revealed the deep mysteries of the heavens and the earth, sharing knowledge that few humans could ever comprehend. Think about it. These beings held the blueprints of the universe. They didn't just watch the world unfold, and they understood it, and some were even tasked with guiding humanity through divine wisdom. But if they were so important, why were only a few archangels mentioned in the Bible? Why were some names completely erased from the sacred texts? The truth is, the role of archangels was too complex, too powerful, and maybe even too dangerous for certain historical times. The Bible as we know it was compiled and edited over centuries. At some points in history, religious leaders and councils were more focused on creating a simplified version of the divine story, one that was easy for people to understand and follow. So the archangels we know, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, are the easier examples. They fit into the picture of a perfect, peaceful heaven, where everything runs smoothly and only good angels remain. But what happens when you bring in angels who are not just messengers but also warriors, judges, and carriers of forbidden knowledge? What happens when angels begin to question divine law or challenge the very structure of heaven itself? The archangels who were erased were too complex, too tied to ideas that didn't fit with the church's doctrine. Some of these angels were aligned with rebellion and freedom of thought, things that would have been controversial, especially for a church that wanted to establish clear, unchallenged authority. Take Uriel, for example. He was the angel of wisdom, but in some traditions, he was also seen as the bearer of forbidden knowledge. He revealed things that humans weren't supposed to know. He made the divine more understandable, but also more dangerous. The church didn't want people questioning heaven's divine order. So Uriel's role had to be silenced. This is the reality we don't often talk about. The divine hierarchy isn't just about order, it's about control. The archangels weren't just servants of God. They were powerful beings who could question, who could challenge, who could reveal. And that is why some of them were erased from the Bible, because the truth they carried could unravel the very foundations of divine power that religion sought to control. So now we know what the archangels were: guardians, warriors, judges, and keepers of hidden knowledge. And we know why some of them were removed from the Bible. But the question remains, who were these archangels? What did they know? And why were their names silenced for good? Let's continue our journey and uncover the names, roles, and secrets of the lost archangels, the ones the Bible didn't want us to know. We all know the names: Michael, the mighty warrior, leading heaven's armies with a sword of fire; Gabriel, the messenger, carrying God's words to humankind with wings of light, and Raphael, the healer, who watches over us in our moments of need, bringing solace and protection. These are the archangels who are celebrated, who are spoken of in scriptures, who have their places in every holy story. They are the familiar ones, the ones who have become symbols of strength, guidance, and healing. But what about the others? The names that never made it into the Bible? Were they less important? Were they less divine? Or was there something more, something darker, hidden away that we were never meant to know? Think about the role these angels play in our spiritual imagination. Michael the warrior stands guard over heaven itself. He is the protector, strong, unmovable. But when you peel back the layers of the story, you realize Michael's role isn't just about fighting evil. He is justice. And justice isn't always clear. It's not always black and white. Sometimes justice means protecting a divine order that is imperfect, a system that needs to be maintained at all costs. Then there's Gabriel, the messenger, the one who brought the good news to Mary, announcing the birth of Jesus. He is the one we turn to when we need answers, when we are waiting for guidance. Gabriel's role is to deliver the divine will, but think about this. Gabriel didn't just bring news of life, he also brought news of death, news of change. He was the one who came to announce the end of things as much as he brought about new beginnings. Gabriel's message was powerful, and sometimes his messages were not always ones we were ready to hear. He didn't just bring hope, he brought truth, and truth can be uncomfortable. And yet Gabriel remains the voice that guides us, even if that guidance sometimes leads us into the unknown. Now let's consider Raphael, the healer. He doesn't come with a sword like Michael or a divine message like Gabriel. No, Raphael's power is in restoration, in healing, in renewal. He is the one who takes the broken and mends it, who takes the wounded and soothes them. Raphael's name is known in the Book of Tobit, an ancient text that many Christian traditions have left out. In the stories we do know, Raphael heals physical wounds. But what about the wounds of the soul? What does it mean when an archangel has the power to heal not just our bodies, but our deepest pains? What if Raphael's role extends beyond simply healing? What if he was the keeper of secrets, the one who understood the fragility of our spirits? Each of these names, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, represents something essential to the divine order. But what is most fascinating is not just their roles, but what their stories leave out. What other angels might have stood at the side of these great beings? In a world where so much has been lost to time, there are names that never made it to the pages of Scripture. We've been told that Michael is the protector, that Gabriel is the messenger, that Raphael is the healer. But why were these others erased? Were their names too powerful, too dangerous to keep in the Scriptures? Were they erased because they represented something the world wasn't ready to understand? The answer lies in the mystery of what we don't know. The lost archangels, the names we've never heard, are not the forgotten parts of the story. They are the hidden layers of a divine truth waiting to be uncovered. What if one of them was the angel of wisdom, a being who knew the secrets of the stars, whose light could illuminate the dark spaces of creation? What if one of them was the angel of justice who didn't just punish, but balanced divine law and human freedom? What if there was one who knew the end of days, not just as a prophecy, but as a necessary cycle, a cosmic process beyond human understanding? These archangels were not just servants. They were rulers, keepers of secrets, carriers of forbidden knowledge. Their stories, their names, have been erased from the sacred texts because they held truths that were too powerful, too complex for a world that wanted to see heaven in black and white. And yet, even though their names were erased, they still matter, because the hidden truths they carried are still relevant today. Their roles were not just divine for that time. Their stories, their purpose, their influence. It's something we need to understand now. We need to remember these angels and the things they taught. Their names may be erased, but their legacy is eternal. In the end, we ask, why were these archangels erased? Were they really erased? Or have they just been waiting patiently for someone to listen and to reveal what the Bible didn't want you to know? Let's take a deeper look into these lost archangels and discover why their names were too dangerous to be written down. There were 7 archangels, once standing before the throne of God, 7 divine beings, each with their own powers, responsibilities, and missions. Yet today only a handful of their names are known. The rest? Erased, removed from the pages of Scripture, wiped from the history that was passed down to us. But who were these erased angels? Why were their names taken away? And why does history want to forget them? Let's take a closer look at these lost beings, starting with Uriel. Uriel, Gestum, the light of God, a being of immense wisdom and power. But what's fascinating about Uriel is not just his name, it's his role and the danger his knowledge posed to the human world. In the book of Enoch, Uriel is the one who reveals secrets of the universe. He explains the laws of nature, the hidden forces of creation, and the very fabric of the heavens. Uriel carried knowledge that no mortal should have known. His wisdom was too vast, too dangerous for a world that was still fragile, still learning to walk in divine light. You see, wisdom like his can change the way you see everything. It can shake the foundations of your beliefs and make you question the very order of the universe. What if the hidden knowledge Uriel possessed threatened to turn the established world upside down? What if that was the reason he was erased? Not because he was wrong, but because his truths were too unsettling to be told. Next, we have Raphael, the angel of justice. Raphael's role was to uphold the divine law, ensuring that justice was not only done, but seen to be done in heaven and on earth. Justice sounds like a noble cause, right? But what if that kind of justice goes against the established order? What if Raphael's sense of balance threatened the very authority of the heavenly realm? Raphael wasn't just a judge. He was the one who kept everyone in line, even the angels. He ensured that those who broke divine law were held accountable, even if it meant confronting his own kind. But imagine what happens when an angel tasked with upholding justice is silenced. What does it mean when balance becomes a threat? Then there's Raphael, the angel of resurrection. You've probably heard that resurrection is a divine mystery, one that remains in the hands of a higher power. But Raphael wasn't just a witness to life's rebirth. He had the authority to oversee it. He watched over the souls of the departed, guiding them through the realms between life and death. This wasn't just an angelic task. Raphael held the keys to the afterlife, to the balance of life and death itself. The concept of resurrection is a dangerous one, isn't it? To have power over life and death is to have power over destiny, to manipulate the very fabric of existence. What does that power mean for the world, for humanity, for the laws of heaven? Maybe this was why Raphael was erased, because the ability to return the dead is more than just divine. It's an influence that could shape the future in ways we might never understand. And then we have Raphael, the angel tasked with overseeing lost souls. Now, Raphael's name isn't even recognized in most religious texts. His existence is barely acknowledged. But in the book of Enoch, his role becomes clear. He is the guardian of those who have been forgotten, the souls who were abandoned, lost in the cosmic balance between life and death. Raphael didn't just watch over the righteous. He held the unseen, the forgotten, and the lost in his hands. Imagine an archangel who is responsible for the souls that are overlooked by history, the souls that slip through the cracks in the divine system. What does it mean for heaven when some souls are cast aside? Is it justice or failure to leave certain souls behind? Raphael was there to ensure no soul was truly forgotten, but in doing so, he may have raised questions about how heaven truly works. These are the 4 archangels whose names we remember in ancient texts. Yet the other 3 remain completely unknown. Why were they left out? Were they truly less important, or was their purpose too complex, too dangerous to include? Why were these beings chosen to stand in the presence of God, erased from the official narrative? What truths did they carry that made them a threat to the established world? The more we look at these erased archangels, the more we see that their roles were not only powerful but unsettling. These were not angels who simply obeyed. They were the ones who carried the weight of heaven, keeping divine law intact, making sure nothing was left to chance. As we uncover these lost angels, we begin to understand why they were erased. Their names weren't just forgotten. They were silenced. And in that silence, the questions they raised remain. If you want to understand why they were erased, you need to understand the dangerous knowledge they carried. Because what they knew wasn't just about heaven, it was about us. It was about what happens when the divine law becomes too complicated, too questionable to be left untouched. In the end, the erased archangels are not just footnotes in divine history. They were keepers of cosmic secrets, guardians of lost souls, warriors of justice. Their names were wiped from the scriptures, but the truth they carried never truly vanished. Now that we understand who they were, let's uncover what exactly made these archangels so powerful and why their silence still echoes today. We've explored the names, the roles, and the powers of the lost archangels. But now we need to answer a question that has lingered throughout this story. Why were they removed? Why were these powerful ancient beings, guardians of wisdom, justice, resurrection, and light, erased from the pages of the Bible? Some of these archangels didn't fit into the clean, perfect narrative of heaven that we've been taught. The church, in its efforts to create a simple, understandable doctrine, needed to simplify the divine order. And in doing so, it left out the complicated, the unsettling, the controversial. These archangels represented facets of the divine that weren't easy to accept. They embodied the complexity of heaven. They didn't just obey, they questioned. They didn't just bring messages, they brought truths that challenged everything we knew. Take Uriel, for example, the angel of wisdom, the light of Mo, carrying knowledge so vast, so intense, it could have shattered the fragile understanding humans had of the divine. Uriel wasn't just an observer, he was an explorer of the secrets of the universe. He carried the knowledge of how things worked in the heavens and on earth, and some of that knowledge was too powerful for humans to comprehend. What if that knowledge could change the very nature of human existence? What if Uriel's wisdom could have shifted the balance of heaven, of life and death, in ways we weren't ready for? This is the reason why his name was erased, because the truth he carried was too dangerous. It wasn't just a question of obedience, but about the very structure of existence itself. Then we have Raphael, the angel of justice. What happens when you have an angel whose job is not just to follow divine orders, but to hold others accountable, even those in heaven itself? Raphael was the one who ensured that justice prevailed, no matter the cost. He didn't just keep the balance in heaven, he enforced it. He held divine beings to the same standards he held humanity. But what does that do to the idea of a perfect heaven? If even the angels could be punished, what does that say about God's divine order? What if that accountability was a reminder that even in the highest realms of existence, perfection was a delicate illusion? This idea of divine justice, one that was absolute but not without conflict, didn't fit with the picture the church wanted to paint. A perfect heaven requires perfect angels, angels who obey without question. And Raphael's very presence challenged that notion. Now consider Raphael, the angel of resurrection. Resurrection isn't just about bringing someone back to life. It's about control over life and death itself. And who has the right to control life? Raphael didn't just watch over the dead. He had the power to guide souls through the afterlife. His power gave him the ability to control the very cycle of life and death, a realm where only God was meant to have authority. In many ways, Raphael's role was too dangerous for a world that needed to keep a clear line between heaven and earth. What would happen if people started to believe that life and death were not final, that an archangel could have power over resurrection? It's easy to see how Raphael's power would challenge not just the order of heaven, but the order of life itself. And in a world where divine control was absolute, such power could not be allowed. And finally, we come to Raphael, the overseer of lost souls, the one who watched over the souls that slipped through the cracks, those forgotten or lost to the ages. Raphael wasn't just keeping track of the righteous, he was watching over those who were cast aside, the ones who didn't belong to either the heavenly or the earthly realms. Raphael's job was a reminder that not everyone is easily categorized, that even in heaven there are those who fall through the cracks. He represented the uncertain, the complexity of divine law. What if heaven wasn't just a place for the righteous and the damned? What if there were others? Others whose souls didn't fit into the neat categories of divine order. Raphael challenged the very idea of a perfect heaven. He forced us to question the divine law, to ask whether heaven really embraced all souls, or just the ones that fit. And for that reason, his name was erased. But it wasn't just about their power, their wisdom, or their roles. It was about the threat they posed to a simplified divine order. The early church was not concerned with the complexities of heaven. It wanted a clean story, one where angels obeyed, where heaven was perfect, and where all things fit neatly into divine law. The archangels who were removed challenged that story. They dared to ask questions, to expose the flaws in the celestial system, and to offer knowledge that humanity wasn't ready to understand. These archangels represented the darker side of divine law, the complexities, the uncomfortable truths, and the realities that threatened the perfect image of heaven. And so they were erased, not because they were evil, but because they were too real. As we uncover the lost names, the lost stories of these archangels, we begin to see the full scope of their erasure, not just as a removal of power, but as an attempt to control the narrative of heaven, to make it something easier to understand. But the truth always slips through the cracks, and the stories of these forgotten archangels can't be fully erased, not as long as we keep searching. So now we know the names, the 7 archangels who once stood before God's throne. We've learned about their roles, their powers, and why they were erased from the pages of the Bible. But now the real question remains, what does it all mean? What does their erasure say about the divine? What does it tell us about the forces that shape the religious texts we read today? And more importantly, what remains? These archangels, once considered the highest of the high, are now lost to time. Their names, their stories, erased, buried, forgotten. And yet, in their absence, something significant remains. Their stories were silenced, not because they were false, but because they were too powerful, too dangerous, too uncomfortable for the world at the time. And this leaves us with a question that goes far beyond the archangels themselves. What else has been hidden from us? What truths have been suppressed for fear of challenging the very power that controls the narrative? These lost archangels represent a side of the divine that we rarely get to see. They embody knowledge, justice, and even rebellion, things that don't fit neatly into the picture of a perfect, orderly heaven. In many ways, the truth of these angels reveals something about our own understanding of the world, about how we view authority, about how we view the divine. These archangels didn't just accept the status quo. They were keepers of wisdom, guardians of justice, and yes, some of them even dared to challenge divine law itself. And that is a story we've been denied. What if the angels we remember, the ones we praise, the ones we speak about in our prayers, are not the whole truth? What if their stories too have been filtered, shaped, to fit a narrative that protects power? What remains then is the truth that these lost archangels left behind, not just in their names, not just in the roles they played in heaven's great drama, but in the questions they raised, the complications they introduced. They challenged the simplified version of the divine that we have come to accept. And maybe, just maybe, their story is one we still need to hear. When we think about the archangels who were removed, we see more than just erased names. We see a shift in how divinity was defined. We see a change in what was considered acceptable knowledge. They didn't just bring messages, they brought truths that forced us to look at the divine in a new light. These archangels were more than just celestial beings. They were custodians of forgotten wisdom, of divine knowledge that could alter the very fabric of existence. And if they had been allowed to remain in the story, perhaps the world would have been forced to confront deeper, uncomfortable truths about divine order, about humanity's place in the cosmic balance, and about power itself. And yet, we cannot ignore the fact that what remains of their story and what survives today has never truly been erased. Their legacy still lingers in the shadows, in the margins of ancient texts, in forgotten scrolls, and in the whispers of those who dare to seek out the truth. The stories of the lost archangels haven't disappeared. They've simply been pushed into the background, waiting for someone to uncover them, to remember them. Even today, people are searching. We search for answers in old manuscripts, in texts banned by the church, in artifacts buried under centuries of dust. And with each discovery, we uncover pieces of a much larger story, one that challenges the world as we know it. What remains is the memory of these angels, not just their names, but the principles they embodied, justice, wisdom, knowledge, and the daring to question. They didn't just serve the divine. They were the voices of complexity, the voices of defiance, the voices that could not be silenced. And in their erasure, we've lost something important. We've lost a richer understanding of the divine, a divine that wasn't just about obedience, but about questioning, about growth, and yes, even about rebellion. We live in a world where stories are told by those who control the narrative, where power is often kept hidden in perfect, unchallenged stories. The archangels who were erased, who were silenced, represent the very truths we've been denied. Their legacy is a call to question the stories we've been told, to search for what remains beneath the surface. Because what remains, what is still here, is the truth, and it's waiting for us to uncover it. We may never know the full story of the lost archangels, but the fact that their story hasn't been completely erased means that we still have a chance to learn, to question, to seek out what was hidden. And that, in itself, is the most important lesson they left behind.